Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Turf Shack. Welcome to episode 70 of Color and Emotion. Dun, 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 dun. So today I'm actually going to be talking about, I came up with another alliteration. What was it? Purposeful passion. Because I've been talking a lot about like the spiritual aspects and components of my discipleship and endurance in that way. But I actually was thinking about a different part of my artistic process that I don't really talk a ton about. And so I thought I would share. And I was going to start with some more lore from The Sims 2. So in a previous video, I was talking about like my process where I was playing Sims and I had in mind like this goal that I wanted to do, and I needed to accomplish it through a sim because obviously I'm not digital myself. And so in the process of that, just like I had to start somewhere. So I picked a family, and it just so happened, and I believe that the Lord plays with me. He delights. So things that are like randomized, I'm like, oh, thanks, Lord. Anyway, so the family that I like picked, it just so happened that like their desires and temperaments, which I can't control, aligned with my purposes. And so I was very stoked about that. And I was processing that in terms of the Lord presenting the people of Israel as his chosen group of people through whom to bring revelation of him into the world, as well as salvation through Jesus, the Messiah, who is Jewish. Amen? But then, so I had this like whole, basically like empire that developed over time. So I played The Sims 2. I don't like the other ones really. I tried the 4 and it was weird, and so then I quit that. So Sims 2 is like my jam. And I ended up, so on that one you have like a main town, and then you can have like these little districts where you can control the climate. And there's a lot of different like styles and cultures that you can kind of cultivate based on the options as far as like building materials and that kind of thing. So it was fun because I ended up having like 7 cities, and I was able to like give each one like its own unique style and climate. And so that made it really fun. And what made each particular culture fun was that it wasn't like all the other ones, but there was a general cohesiveness because it had the same creator, right? So that was like really interesting. But then it crashed and it was real sad. I mean, I honestly wasn't particularly devastated, but it was like kind of a bummer because I had put so much work into it and it had become established and it was like really fun and whatever. So then I was like, oh, well, I guess I should move on to other things. But then I realized that I actually benefit from having that hobby because I don't have a ton of like hobbies actually. I've never been somebody who was like hobby oriented. Like I like to do practical, productive things, and I like to help people when I have free time, and I like to spend time with the Lord. And all that's good, and it's okay when your priorities are in order to have something that you do for fun. And that's part of what the Lord was teaching me, was about play and recreation, and not always having to have something be efficient, you know, and have dual purposes. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start over. But I was kind of like making note about like, of my whole empire that I had, like what were some of the things that I most enjoyed, and I wanted to just kind of like approach it differently this time. And it's interesting because even with the previous empire, before what I have termed the sudden destruction, I was getting to a point where I was like, it was fun having all these generations, but I'm like, I don't want to just like have generations go on forever and ever. And so then I was like contemplating, when I started that, a lot of the Sims had like family orientation as their aspirations. And so that lent itself to filling up my islands and towns and like a lot of like babies and stuff like that. So there's only a few that I actually will do because some of the other aspirations just are inherently janky and I don't enjoy it, because then the desires are like weird things that I'm not going to do. Because I'm a wholesome Sims player. I don't play for the weirdness and the shenanigans and like trying to make them suffer on purpose or have all this drama. Like I like the purity and perfection of just having like these beautiful creative towns. So the 2 that I mainly will do, sometimes I'll do knowledge aspiration but mainly I was doing like family and popularity. But for me, I think of popularity as like community oriented. And so when you choose that one, again, their aspiration itself is like randomized. You can choose the direction that they go in, but what they actually want is randomized. But a lot of times the popularity one would be community oriented. So like things like wanting to be like a lawyer or mayor or something like that that has a function in a community. So I decided this time around with the new post sudden destruction town that I was going to keep it more insular. I think that's the word I want to use. Actually, let me look it up in real time. Y'all, also, I finally have been reading more, and I've been learning so many new words, or recollecting words. Recollecting, I like that as a adjective. Okay, I mean, it's close enough. Anyways, so I was like wanting to, it was interesting because I was, like I said before, kind of what made each of the towns in the previous empire enjoyable was that it was distinct and it didn't have to be all the things. So for example, there was one town that it was summer all the time and they had a lot of beach lots, so I chose like a landscape that allowed for a lot of beach lots. And then there was this other town though that was like very small. There were only a handful of lots at all, and it was, none of them were beachy, but I made it like a cozy snow town. And so that was actually like one of my favorite cities. And the architecture that I made in that city was not what I would typically like default to, but I kind of was like more open to different combinations of materials, and I was able to like make some really cool cozy properties. And so when I was doing it again, I was like thinking about some of the other things that I've been processing lately, which kind of does come back to this insular word. And I don't really mean it in terms of like isolation, but I do mean it in terms of like, I guess focused in a sense, but then also a specificity. So one of the things that I've been thinking lately is how one of the markers of maturity, emotionally and then also even just like socially, I guess, is recognizing and celebrating what makes you come alive. And the reason that I say that is because I feel like our society and social media and like the algorithm try to capitalize on this human tendency that is somewhat immature, where like you look to other people to figure out what do you like. You know what I mean? It's like you think about kids in school, in the early years of school and in high school, where it's like you look to your group to figure out what do we like. Do we like this artist? Do we like these people, these peers of ours? Like, what do we like? But then there's something about maturation where it's like you become your own person, and as a believer, you look to the Lord and you're like, Lord, what do you like? And then you seek Him and you want to align yourself with His desires. And the thing about God is that He's so big and brilliant and such a glorious creator that there's true, genuine diversity within Him. And so all of His creation is not going to look exactly the same. And it's so fascinating to me that the world system tries to push as diversity the same ideologies. But then it's like, if people look different on the outside, now we have diversity. And I know because I worked in corporate America, and it was like everybody want to talk about inclusiveness and all this, that, and the third. And it's like, no, you want everybody that thinks exactly the same way. That's not diversity. Just because she has blue hair and I have brown skin, like, you don't have a diverse team if we all think exactly the same thing about everything, you know? And again, that's why there is such a thing as submission and leadership, because you have to have somebody whose role it is to decide the direction that everybody's going in when you don't all think the same. And you have to be able to, if you want, you either have to get with the program or get out at some point. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to, nobody's feelings have to be hurt, especially in corporate America. It's like, you know what? This isn't the place for me anymore. And you find something else to do. So when it comes to the kingdom, though, of God, it's like there is place for everybody, and God is specific in how He puts us together. But at the end of the day, He gets the glory, and the agenda is His agenda. It's not anybody else's agenda. And I was kind of thinking about that because I was processing the fact that sometimes people who come with all of this extra energy about super progressive ideas and the way that we have delineated them in our society. And I wasn't intending to like come out of the gate and be political, but here we are. It matters, and it's related. So track with me, if you will. I was thinking about how some people, I'll start on the right side, right? Because I was processing, like I said before, just the fact that some people, you can see their faith deteriorating. There's all of this like deconstruction and all of this sort of like resentment and grief and trauma that causes people to pull away altogether from God and the gospel and scripture and all this stuff. And sometimes what those people will cite as things that, you know, they became enlightened from, I guess, are things like fundamentalism and like everybody has to, like this list of rules, the self-righteousness, the hypocrisy, and all these things. You have to believe this way, you have to do this. If you don't do that, then you're not part of us or whatever. And it's interesting because it genuinely is a pendulum swing for some people. They go to the complete other side, and it's like, if you don't believe all of these things, if you don't co-sign our ideologies, then you're problematic. And like there's this weird like self-righteousness and this like embracing of their own hypocrisy, where like rather than acknowledge that we all see in part and operate with a degree of humility, that's like, you know what, I don't actually have all the solutions, and I see within myself things that I actually am constantly verbally condemning, rather than just being like, well, that's okay because I'm a champagne socialist, or whatever the thing is that you make up to kind of accommodate your own hypocrisy and live in this bubble of self-righteousness that just so happens to be an opposite set of values in the self-righteousness that you came out of, you know what I mean? It's like you're doing literally the exact same thing that drove you away from the truth. And so that's why it's important to seek God for ourselves, because when we genuinely seek the truth, we're going to come to Jesus. Amen? And the Holy Spirit empowers us to live with truth, but also with the fruit of the Spirit, which is how we conduct our lives and how we interact with each other. And it's going to be things like gentleness, peace-loving, forgiveness, like, you know what I mean? All of these things that are just necessary no matter what you believe, if you want to have cohesion and if you want to have genuine diversity, because again, God is so big and there's so many facets to him, and he reveals himself to us, but he reveals himself to us in different ways, and he reveals different aspects and facets of himself to different parts of the body. And so there's just a great deal of humility in recognizing that we all see in part, and that we only can see as much as we can see right now. And the thing about a blind spot is that you can't see that you have it, right? And the thing about living within time is that certain things are revealed over time. Certain things are exposed over time. And I was even just thinking about that as it pertains to like different things where it's like I wanted to be part of something and it didn't work out, or I was rejected or whatever. Come to find out, it was a crazy thing going on over there, and it really was the Lord protecting me. And it's like you wouldn't know that right away, you know? So anyway, I was thinking about all that. I don't know what that has to do with The Sims, but anyway, when I was coming back to start over, I was thinking about how like some of my favorite things about the first empire that I had built, the 7 cities, the saga, were some of the love stories. And again, because I can't control everything about The Sims and like their desires and their aspirations and all this, some of the love stories were like really surprising to me, and it was just fun to like see what they wanted and help make it happen and like facilitate that coming together. So there's one in particular where, because I had this chosen family and they had 6 kids. They had 5 boys and 1 girl. And they wanted, hold on, let me think about this. One of the parents wanted to graduate 3 kids from, no, the mom wanted to have 6 kids get married, and the dad wanted to become the top of the education career. So, but I sent them all to school because of logistics in the gameplay that I won't go into. But one of them dropped out immediately and decided to just travel anyways, so he didn't get a degree ever. But he was dating his sister's best friend, who was at school with his sister. And then, like I said, there were other brothers. And so I was trying to like facilitate this marriage thing because I wanted them all to get married. They wanted to get married. They all had family things as their aspiration. And so I like made these people to go to school with them. And there was like this one guy, he had like these certain attributes that he was attracted to. So I made Sims with those attributes. And I sent him to school and he didn't like any of them. I was like, what? But I wasn't going to force it. I really wasn't. So I was like, well, you just going to be hanging out by yourself then, because I tried, you know. But then I felt bad. I didn't want to like just bend the girls because the guys didn't want them. So this one girl, of her own, like just from within herself, she had this desire to buy a toy bench, which is one of the crafts that you can pursue in the game. And sometimes they'll just like want to buy something and then they'll never have a want to interact with that object again. But sometimes they want to get like really good at it, which comes in the form of a desire to obtain a certain level, like a bronze or a talent. It's like called a talent badge. So I bought her the toy bench. And then she actually wanted to become bronze level toy maker. So because I felt like it defeated the purpose of her being in school, she wasn't really into like, she didn't have any collegiate wants. Like sometimes they'll be like, I want to major in this, or like, I want to write my term paper, or I want to go to class, I want to study with people. She had none of that. She's like, I want to make toys, I want to go swimming. It was like all this stuff. So I pulled her out of school and I had her like work on being a toy maker. Meanwhile, this other part of the empire was like under development, and it was the cozy town that I was telling you guys about. And so I felt like she didn't fit in any of the other ones. So I put her in that cozy town. And then there were another group of brothers who needed wives from the cozy town. And she became friends with one of them, but they didn't have any like chemistry. It was literally just a friendship. But he had like this awkward brother who really wanted to get married, and I couldn't find a wife for him because he didn't have like chemistry with anybody. And so I had his name was Dean, he was like this cool musician type sim. It was kind of funny. So he had like this awkward brother, and the brother was named Daniel, and the girl I'm talking about was named Helen. Okay, so Dean invited Daniel and Helen over to his house so they could meet, and they actually had chemistry and liked each other. And the thing that was fun, to make a long story short, is that it ended up being like this Hallmark story because Daniel, actually it's not going to be short because I have to tell this part of it. Daniel, when he moved out of his parents' house, he was the last one to move out because he had like this aspiration that was family oriented, but it was like vague. And his brother Dean wanted to be a musician, so that's why he was a musician. And the other brother wanted to be a military general, so he moved out and like enlisted or whatever. So then I finally got around to, and like I said, I had 7 cities. It was like a lot going on. So, and I have other stuff to do, obviously. So anyway, but I decided to just embrace the season of being a gamer, and I just fully enjoyed all of it. So Dean, what was the brother's name? Dennis. Oh, he had a fun love story too. I might tell his. Anyway, Dean was the musician, and he lived in this cool log cabin in the same town that they were all from. Dennis, I moved out to the desert town to pursue his military goals. And Helen, I moved to the cozy town because she just kind of didn't really fit in any of the other towns, and she wanted to make toys. So I was like, oh, this is so fun. She can have like a cozy toy store in the town, the only town where it snows, right? And so I was kind of like developing that for her. And so then when Dean invited her and Daniel over, it was after Daniel's story had got a little bit more traction, which was that I moved him out. He wanted to get a pet, and I could have sworn I clicked adopt a pet, but apparently I clicked to adopt a child because the next day the social worker showed up with this little boy. It doesn't let you, like, when you want to adopt a pet, when they come, they're like, are you sure you want to adopt this pet? Once you click that you want to adopt a child, it's over. Like, you just, the kid is coming. So I was like, what? And so they just showed up with this little boy named Dawson. And it's funny because all the boys in that family, their names all started with D, and then Dawson was accidentally adopted, but he fit right in and he looked like them. And it was just really funny. So then Daniel he's suddenly a single dad. But I also had given him a job as a police officer because that was rolled into one of his wants, was that he wanted to get a job as a police officer. So he had this crazy schedule. So then he had to get a nanny because you can't like leave the kids home by themselves. And because, his son needed help with like being fed and getting his homework done and all this. So I'm like, dang, now he really needs a wife because he needs help with Dawson. So then when Dean invited Daniel and Helen over and they hit it off, I was like so relieved. And it turned into this like really fun love story because it wasn't just about them. It was also like, now Dawson could have like a whole family and he didn't have to. It was like kind of sad watching him be home with the nanny, and like the interactions with the nanny are so limited, and it was just like, oh, sad. And like I said, it's the only time where it snows. So it's like the thing about that is like it could be either really cozy or really lonely. So anyway, Helen and Daniel got married and it was real fun, and Dawson was happy about that. So the other fun love story was Dennis, like I said, moved to the desert, and then he was pursuing his career in the military. And he was another sim where I was like, he just didn't like any of the sims. I'm like, whatever, you're just going to be by yourself then. And there was this other girl named Coral who was from the beach town, and she was the same way. She just like, everybody that I tried to introduce her to, no chemistry. She was just like living her best life. She was an athlete and a journalist. So one day, after I made the 7th city, I decided to move Dean and his brother's parents to that 7th city that had a milder climate, so that because they were like, you know, elders. And they were kind of like, their personalities were kind of whack, to be honest. And they had these 2 crazy dogs that were like always in conflict. So I moved the parents and one of the dogs to this like more peaceful community. And then but I really liked the house and the way that the house was arranged. And on the game, if you move everybody out, then you lose the interior decoration of that home, unless you've like put it in the bin first and then whatever. It's like this whole thing. You have to go about it a certain way, but it was too late to do that. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to move Dennis back to the family house, and he'll have one of the dogs and do a military career from the cozy town, and then the parents will be in the milder community. Well, so that's what I was doing. And then Coral's sister was named Bondi, or Bondi, depending on how my mood was, because, again, they were beach people. But she also wanted to be a military general. And she actually did end up falling in love with one of the artisan boys. And so she was married to an artisan at this point. And she was like, got to the place in her career where she got her object reward. So each career path has like an object that you get at a certain level that helps you gain the rest of the skills that you need in order to get to the top of the career. So for the military career, it's like this obstacle course that you get. But they didn't have space in their yard for the obstacle course. Again, I was attached to the house. It was like perfectly set up. I'm like, listen. So what I did was I basically bought them a community lot and put the obstacle course on the community lot, because the other thing is you can offer lessons to people in your area of expertise. So even though you don't get skill points when you work on a skill in a lot that is not their home lot, just to shake things up, I sent Dennis to Bondi's obstacle course to work out because they were colleagues, because they were both in the military career. Well, Coral happened to be there because it's her sister's lot. And again, I can't control this. Like, they just randomly send Sims to your lots when you're doing stuff, right? But Coral walks by and she had this little thought bubble where she liked Dennis. And I was like, what? No. So then I had him talk to her, and they had chemistry, and then they ended up falling in love and getting married. And it was so fun. And it was like one of the few engagements that happened like at a party in a group of friends, because it rolled up in that way. So that was fun. So anyway, all that to say, I realized like what I liked about it was the coziness of the snow town and these like different love stories. And so when I started over after the sudden destruction, when everything crashed and I had to start over, I basically approached it where like I took some of my favorite elements from each of the 7 cities in this empire, and I was able to kind of create a new world where it reflected what I had discovered I most enjoyed about playing the game. And so part of my approach was that I made these different like sibling pairs to where people could fall in love and get married, but not all be intermarried with their in-laws. So that was part of the approach. But the other part of the approach that was different was that I decided to give the vast majority of them this community aspiration and actually fulfill that, as opposed to the first time around where I already had in mind that I wanted a specific sim that could do something that would benefit all the other sims. And from there, I was kind of like playing in that way. And that's how it ended up growing into this mass of like 7 different cities in this empire. Well, this time around, it's like I actually decided to kind of like go deep with each sim's story from the inside out, and not feel like I needed their stories to all like integrate in the same way that they did before, which was really fun, but I just wanted to do a different approach this time. And so I was thinking that was like all happening kind of in the backdrop. And then at the same time, in my own personal life and just like reading some different stuff and processing things, I was thinking about how like one of the best antidotes to envy is when you decide to deeply delight in your own story and in the heart of the God who is writing your story, rather than constantly like looking outward, even to figure out like how I'm supposed to serve everybody else. It's like there is that aspect, but then there's also this aspect of like intimacy with the Lord and like deep delight in your own story and being honest about what your passions actually are. And so part of why that has been relevant and an interesting conversation, I guess, for myself and between me and the Lord is because I honestly have never really felt passionate about music specifically. I used to be a worship leader, as I mentioned, and what I was passionate about then was facilitating environments in which people could connect with God and experience intimacy with Him. For me, it wasn't about like playing the music or even like obviously, yes, singing songs because I was mostly a singer when I led worship. And I do really love singing and I have a lot of fun with it when there's no pressure for it to be anything other than me just singing. That's sometimes when the best vocals come out of me, is when I'm just like having fun and throwing my voice around. But I recently have made new friends with these different people in the area and they have like a studio and they were having this jam session and I was mostly there just to hang out and watch. Because I already knew, like, jam sessions are not my thing because I'll get to it later, but, like, what I am passionate about is writing, actually. But I went to just go be there, and they were, like, so into it. It was just so fun, though, to watch people who are gifted musicians, like, give themselves to it and to really, like, get a lot out of it, and it was mostly men over there, and so the energy was very like masculine in general, but then also like they were doing like improv, and it was just interesting to see how like the more intense and chaotic it felt, the more they seemed to be enjoying it. And I was like, this is just very interesting. It's not at all the way that I am and the way that I approach music. Because I most enjoy writing music and getting to a place where like other people who aren't necessarily skilled musicians have a point of entry and they can like come in to it, and like even if it's just like singing the chorus or whatever, like I like that, and I like when it goes from being messy and like just all of my emotions all over the place or just like all these different thoughts that I'm trying to like bring together, when it comes together and it comes into focus and takes shape, that's when I get really stoked, is when I've written something that is discernible and like you know where it's going, and it gives me a sense of closure that I have lacked for most of the things in my life. So I was thinking about that, and I was also recognizing and remembering that like not just writing music, but like writing is really something that I'm passionate about. But because I felt like the Lord was like leading me in a different direction, and I do still think that He was, it was something that I kind of had to just like let go of. But it was also something where it's like I wanted to blow up as a blogger, basically, because I was writing in the same era that blogging was like blowing up, and I am a good writer, but there's something about blogging in particular that is its own art form, because it takes into it the digital medium and like the interface that the reader is going to be connecting with your words through, and even things like typeface and emphasis that can only be expressed through typeface. It's like a very unique form of expression, because like you can underline something when you write by hand or whatever, but there's ways that you can use graphic design and typeface to convey things in a way that there's just really nothing else quite like it. And at the same time, honing that skill of writing and storytelling is something that can be completely analog. And so lately I've been really interested in like storytelling, and I have plans to kind of study oral tradition. I think I'm going to order some books. Also, this book right here, Ein Karem, is a book about a specific village in Jerusalem that has been around since biblical times. And that was part of what was like interesting to me when I was processing like these different love stories that I enjoyed finding myself facilitating in The Sims, because she was like telling these different stories of families in this village, and like and she hosts tours of the village because, again, it's a historical place. So every time she would have a tour group and she would tell this story, there would always be somebody in the tour who like knew the people and the family, and there would be like these layers that got added to it, because they'd be like, yo, like that's my brother, sister, mother, cousin, like actually like this and this happened after the part where that was the most, as much of the story as she knew. They were able to like add all these details to it, and it just was like sparking in me again something about storytelling, but the patience of storytelling and long form content, which, as you got, I'm already 30 minutes and I've hardly even gotten to what I really wanted to talk about. But there's just something about not just like taking up and wasting time, but telling the whole story and giving it space, and also not being so afraid of redundancy. And I think that is something that I was really like learning when I was reading this book, was like she intentionally tells the same stories over and over and over again. I grew up in a Christian home and reading the scriptures, and I actually love hearing those same stories over and over and over again. But for whatever reason, probably experience and rejection, all these different things, when it comes to like my stories and like, I don't know, writing music, I always had this thing about like not wanting to be redundant and not wanting to bore people. And it's like, well, the people who don't want to listen just won't. You know what I mean? But like, there are people who can get something out of the parts of the story that you take the time to tell, that you can't know that. Like when she has these tours, she doesn't know that the people know the people until they say that they know the people. You know what I mean? And there's like all this extra space and layer that's given to these people's lives. Because that's the other thing, is like at the end of the day, our stories are our lives, you know? So those were some of the things that I was thinking about. And then I was also thinking about painting, because I was thinking about art as self-expression. And again, for me, I have rarely experienced music as primarily self-expression. For me, it has been primarily obedience to what I feel like God is calling me to do, and then also necessity, because I was going through it and I needed an outlet to like process those emotions and to like just have a channel for all of the energy that I was experiencing, as far as just like the intensity of what I was living through and all of those things. And having healthy boundaries in relationships means that sometimes you're not expressing everything. It's healthy to have a degree of transparency depending on what the nature of the relationship is, but at the same time, at the end of the day, people have limitations even on what they can receive. Their capacity to like receive from you and help you process whatever you're going through, even if you're processing how you feel about them, right? So that's part of like why I found myself writing music. And it's interesting because I was seeing these different comments where people were having discourse, I guess, or hot takes online about art and about artists, about AI, all these kinds of things. And I've shared before, like, coming across people who kind of like have this attitude of like anti-gift, where it's like, it's not a gift. Like, you guys aren't chosen. Like, anybody can learn it. Anybody can develop the skill. And this sort of like weird feeling that people who have the thing are gatekeeping the thing because we can't express all of where it comes from or how we experience it. It's like, but it is a gift. Like, it really is. And it's not like we're so awesome and amazing. It's like, what is your gift? Because God's giving you a gift too. And if it's not the same thing, it doesn't have to be. Figure out your thing. You know what I mean? But it was interesting because like all these people were talking about, they were like, this one person was trying to make this socio like ideological argument about wealth disparity and privilege in art. And then they were basically saying that like if everybody had money, everybody would be an artist. I was like, I think that there's something to be said for like having your basic necessities met and being able to pursue other things, but that doesn't mean that everybody would actually make art that's worth sharing to other people. And again, it's so hard to have this conversation without coming across as being a snob or like, bougie or whatever, or self-important. But for me, it really is a conversation about function and about the glory of God. Because at the end of the day, to God be the glory for whatever our gifts are and however we're able to use them. But there was one person in the comments who was like, this is not true. Like, you know what I mean? And then he had like these stats about like people who have money and how they actually don't tend to like pursue art because of the risk and blah, blah, blah. And then they were also saying that people miss this component about their contemporaries, that so many genuine actual artists are compelled. Like, it eats at you until you do the thing. And I feel like there are actually people who don't get that. Like, they just, because they don't have the thing. And so that's the weird part of the conversation is like, people experience life and they experience their gifts and they experience passion in different ways. But at the same time, when you know, you know. Like, you don't always have to explain it to somebody else when they also know the thing. So he was saying that, like, just because you have these, like, tools or money or time on your hands doesn't mean you have within you the stuff to make good art, whatever that medium is. And I was like, thank you. Somebody gets it. Because it's like, if it was up to me, I've said before, like, I wanted to hide away in the suburbs and have babies. I've never been about, like, I want to be a famous artist or I want to be this, like, rock star or whatever. Like, it just has never appealed to me. I always thought it was cool when I was an adolescent, like, the idea that was so glamorized about, like, being in the music studio and all this and that and a third. But actually having something to sing about actually takes a lot of work and soul work and, like, introspection, and it's just work, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, not everybody's willing to do the work, but they want to be famous for having talent. And then I was thinking about how being a performer isn't even the same thing as being an artist. And you have people who are both, but then you have some people who are really gifted and talented at, like, appealing to and entertaining the masses with the art that somebody else made, because those are kind of two different skill sets. And the people who make the kind of art that really gets at the human condition, or even like the honesty of their own experience and the specificity of their own experience that can resonate with a lot of people, are not necessarily put together in the same way as the people who are like willing to just jump on stage with no clothes on and like shake everything that their mama gave them. You know what I mean? Like, it's not always those same people. And sometimes the style of performing your art can be specific to your niche, your specific audience, because I think what I've realized is that, like, for me, even when I'm not singing specifically like Christian church type songs, it still feels like I'm ministering to people when I sit down and sing my songs. It feels like I'm ministering comfort to them, and like there's an anointing on it for that feels different than just like performing and entertaining. And some people, that's their thing, that's between them and the Lord, whatever. That has never even appealed to me as a consumer. Like, I tended to always like more earthy, indie, folky stuff. That's just kind of how I put it together. Anyway, all of that to say that I have not tended to approach my music as primarily self-expression. But when I paint, it has been that. And I have never really taken myself seriously as a painter. And I think that that's probably a good thing. But like, I have tended to paint in recent years when I'm under high stress transitions. And what I have gravitated towards has been mostly abstract watercolor. And when I was in my early 30s, because now I'm on the other side of 35, guys, life comes at you quick. Suddenly you're 36. I was going through this, what do you call it? Phase. I went through like a phase about blush. Like, when I was in my early 30s, everything had to be blush. I love blush. And it was like, I had this blog, again, that was called Blush, because what I like about blush as a color, or family of colors, is that it's soft, but it's also strong. This sort of like rosy, soft obviously in the family of red, right? But it's like not red. It's like blush, you know? And very feminine, but like of strength. Like, because I feel like feminine strength expresses differently than masculine strength. So anyway, so actually, fun fact, the little logo icon of my podcast is not a stock photo. It's a photo I took of my painting palette one day when I was just painting blush abstract watercolor. So I shared a little bit before about how when I would initially paint, I would just kind of like go at it or whatever. But then there came a moment where I felt like more inspired, and like I felt like I was seeking after a method or technique to get my emotions across on this work, as opposed to just painting to fill time and you know, take away stress and be therapeutic. Well, the other day I was reading one of my surfer's journals, and there was this feature about a particular surf photographer and his friend who collaborate, in the sense that the friend surfs and this other guy who can surf and obviously has to be able to swim because of the style of photography that he does. Anyway, they were like sharing some of their work, and I really, really liked one of these pictures, because what they're particularly known for as a duo is, I think he said he called them shutteries or something like that, but basically capturing the actual movement and motion of his friend surfing in a way that is like blurry as an image, but actually really captures the speed and intensity and emotion of that moment. And I really liked one of the images, so I cut it out and I framed it. Well, when I was looking for a frame, because I recently reorganized some of my belongings, I was like, oh yeah, I have that frame that I emptied out because I didn't really like, it was like one of my paintings I think was in it, and I was like, I'm over it. So I used that frame for that. But then I found another frame, and there was this one painting that I almost threw away because it's just so like terrible. But I didn't throw it away because I actually was like, I like it, and it just made me laugh every time that I looked at it, because it just feels so like overly dramatic and juvenile. But then I was staring at it the other day. After I framed it, it felt like a real painting, right? And then, and the thing about me and visual art is that I don't always get it. And I'm not the kind of person where I'm going to pretend to get it. I'm not going to tear down somebody else's stuff. But, you know, there's like jokes on the internet where it's like, you see something and you're like, okay. Like, you know what I mean? But it has value to somebody, and they paid a lot of money for it, or they put it on the, you know, it's being featured somewhere as like this great work of art. And so then I was like staring at this, and it just, I don't know, like it spoke to me in a different way. And it was still funny. Like, I still think it's funny, but because it's so basic. But then I put it in this frame, and suddenly it felt like a real painting, right? And it's just like so terrible. But at the same time, it's actually like not that bad. And I was thinking about like, you can't, okay, there you go. It's like if somebody wanted to buy this, or they were like, oh, can I have that? I wouldn't want to just give it to them, because then I wouldn't have it anymore. And it's literally one of a kind, because when am I ever going to make this again? And it's like, this is years later, right? And it's literally Crayola on like construction paper. And it's like, she's got this weird janky thing going on. And it's like, what is going on with that? And it's like, is the mascara running on purpose? Or is it like, you don't know how to paint and it's terrible? But then I was like, I don't know, there's something about it that I actually like. And I remember what I was like going through when I painted this, and how it just was like, it's just so ridiculous. And it was making me think about, and this is not me reaching, this is genuinely what I was thinking about. I was looking at this, and I was thinking about how it looks like a 12-year-old made this, and there's 12-year-olds that are phenomenal artists. But the point is, it's like, it was never me trying to be anything other than in my apartment and have something to do besides be on social media. But there's like such cool textures that showed up in the hair and stuff after the fact. Anyway, I was thinking about how like the Bible talks about our light and momentary afflictions not being worthy to be compared to the glory that's revealed. And it also talks about us being like children of God. And so I was just thinking about how like when I just let it be what it was, then it actually seemed, I don't know, like I really, really like it now as a painter. So then it made me understand a little bit more like that visual art, and like people who do art as self-expression, because that's literally exactly and all that painting is, was like a moment of self-expression. And then I had this other one, because I have some other paintings that I actually do really like that I've done that are kind of like my music in that they're very simple and basic. Obviously, like I said, this is like 3 colors of a Crayola paint kit that was literally $1. And I have a couple other ones that are like ocean oriented. And so this other one that I like can go either way. It's like this can go this way, but it also can go this way. And it's, again, it's like ocean, or it's basically like a wave with a horizon, sun, if you will. And I really like this. And again, I feel like the colors in it, even though, again, it's literally Crayola palette on a piece of white paper, there's something about the way that it's settled and dried and the way that it's like faded over time that increases the character and cohesiveness of the painting that like I don't want to part with that. And it was interesting to see my own self-expression have value to me in a way that like even my music sometimes hasn't, because the music has been, I think part of what I was thinking was it has to do with self-expression in that like my music has always been things that I lived through that I would rather have not lived through. You know what I mean? But like when I was painting these, it's like ways that I express myself that feel like who I want to be in a sense. And like with this one, I used to have fringe on my hair. I ended up calling it fringe, but I was dealing with some hair trouble. But I really missed when my hair was like thick like this. And I also just like the simplicity of the painting in this one. I don't know. It's so bad. It's like so bad, but it's so good. Anyway, and then also just the one with the ocean. It's like I've always wanted to like live in a beach town. Like that's all I've ever wanted, you know? Like I said before, there's this other specific suburb town that's not near the ocean that I really loved. But the point is, I like feel like I understand self-expression now in a way that I didn't before. So I just wanted to share. I thought it would be fun. Switch things up for the podcast. Obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see my terrible paintings. So you're going to have to go to YouTube. But yeah, I just wanted to share. I'll be back to chat to you guys soon. Okay, bye.